So we're here with Stephen Yeun. Stephen, thank you so much for coming to chat with us, man.
Thanks for having me.
So you're here with your latest film, Burning, and right off the bat, I'd love it if you could just talk a little bit about how you got involved with the film.
Yeah, that's a crazy story.
Good, perfect.
I was in London, tossing and turning from jet lag, and thinking about just things you think about when it's 3 a.m. in London and you're jet lagged. And then I got a random phone call from director Bong, which is like the coolest thing to get. And it was a rushed email or voicemail saying, you need to call me back right now. So I called him back and he goes, Director Lee wants to meet you. And I was like, why? He's one of my heroes. And so it was so crazy. And he said, there's an idea of a role for his new film, and would you take a look at the short story that it's based on, and the script we'll give you when you get to Korea. And luckily, I was leaving for Korea the next day from London, just happened to be. And so I read the short story, loved it, kind of had an understanding of who he wanted me to play before he even told me. And then when I got to Korea, I met him for 3 days straight. And he just gave me the script at the end, and then the third day we hugged. Through our conversation, we just kind of felt like we were on the same page with the character. Right. And so, yeah, and then we shot it, which was 4 to 5 months of something magical. Yeah. Okay. That's the only way I can really put that one. Yeah, it was cool. Sorry, it wasn't that insane of a story, actually. No. Now that I tell it, it's reasonable.
I love how the hug sealed the deal. It
sounds like. Well, it was my Korean is good, but I was born there, but I moved when I was 4, so it's just kind of conversational. Yeah. And so in the early meetings, we had to kind of speak through emotions.
Right.
And I think we landed on the same emotions. So it was cool. It was like nonverbal communication that got us there. And then afterwards we I had to amp up my Korean a little bit.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned that you were born in Seoul, but you moved to the States at an early age. At an early age, were you interested in Korean film and culture, or were you more drawn to North American?
Well, when you're a kid, you just kind of look for anything that can give you some sort of direction or peace. And I think as an immigrant kid, you're oftentimes left to your own devices because your folks are usually pounding the pavement doing something else really late. So I didn't get a really good intro to Korean film from my family. And that wasn't because they're uncultured, it was just because they were grinding.
Yeah, they're working.
I think growing up it was mostly like, you watch daytime television and it was just like the Jeffersons was on, Sanford and Son was on, and you're watching kids stuff and you're trying to put things together, and all of a sudden like Will Smith becomes like the most relatable character to you as Fresh Prince. And then you get to high school, college, and you start digging around into Korean film, and Old Boy kind of came on the scene for everybody. And then you really start picking it through, and then you watch something like Poetry and your mind is exploded because you didn't think that you could make such a deep connection that you didn't have prior to any other type of film. And so after watching that, I was like, oh, I see what's missing here for me. And to find myself here in one of his films is actually pretty incredible.
So what are the films or filmmakers that made you initially want to be an actor, like Korean or otherwise?
I grew up a lot watching, the first movie I saw in the theater was Terminator 2 with my mom.
Oh man, I have a very specific memory of that too. Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger at that era was just such the shit. He was awesome. I remember watching Commando at my house, and my mom cackling, laughing as they bust through the wall, and that really huge-breasted woman is sitting there screaming, and my mom's like laughing because she doesn't think her young son should be watching this. and embarrassed, but also laughing at the situation. It was just strange. But I don't know if it was like that. Sandlot, even Transformers, the animated movie, really blew my mind, and stuff like that. That made me want to story tell, I think.
Right.
And then acting, I don't know. I'm here, and I don't know how. I'll be honest with you. Yeah, it's kind of a weird ride.
Well, we're happy you are.
Oh, thank you.
When did the idea of doing a film in Korea become something that was something you wanted to do, and was it an opportunity you specifically sought out to at this time in your career?
I'll be honest with you, I did not seek that out. And at the current moment, I am still kind of, I will never say not seeking it out, but originally when I was lucky enough to be part of Okja, that was in full knowledge of knowing that it was kind of American-Korean co-production, and I get to work with one of the greatest directors in the world. But the reason why was because I felt like I would only be given pretty limiting stuff if I went to Korea. Not because that they would see me that way, but because my language might fail me, or it'd require me to act on top of acting, to be Korean and then to be the character in Korean. And so I didn't know if I wanted to play a foreigner, what they call in Korea kyopo, who's an immigrant that comes back, and an expat. I didn't know if I really wanted to play that in every single scenario. So I got lucky that I got to find that perfectly in Okja, in kind of like a tongue-in-cheek way. And then when this opportunity came along, it was more, you got to work with director Lee. Like, if he calls you, you have to do it. And I remember telling him, there's a portion of me that could say no to you because I don't want to ruin your movie.
Can we push on that though?
Yeah.
So why were you afraid of ruining the movie?
Because it wasn't, my character's not an American Korean.
Yeah.
He's a full Korean that needs to know the language and know the nuance and be just encoded in the body of being a Korean person. That's just so natural and effortless, especially knowing how natural and effortless his films intend to be. But what was really nice was he let my Americanness still be there. I think the culture that's embedded into my bones of Americana are still so rich and in my body that I can't fully reject them. And so part of that was actually an added layer for Ben. He's fully Korean, but he's a man of the world. And so that vibe actually worked perfectly. And so, to go back, that experience made me really realize that what I was participating in was not necessarily a Korean film, but was kind of maybe like on the precipice of where we're all headed, which is like no borders, no specific cultural delineations, but rather you're just participating in a film that's trying to speak through emotion, which all beings are. So I don't know, it may sound a little too fancy, but that's kind of how that whole experience felt. Was there was no explicit Korean thing about it as my experience. It was really like, we're making a film and just go with it however it comes. Yeah.
Breaking down these, as you said, like borders between what represents a Korean film versus a North American film. I guess one thing that I think would be fantastic if this film was able to do, and you being in it, is have more North American audiences direct their attention to such directors that deserve it. Is that part of that decision of like why you couldn't say no to someone like Director Lee?
I would be lying if I said I had that intelligent of a take. I think it's more, I just felt like it was the right thing I wanted to experience at that time. It felt almost like a force of nature that you can't really say no to. And but I will say, you do see how people can view this if they're not necessarily thinking that extra step or maybe being a little lazy about it. I've read some things that are kind of reductive of Director Lee's work, which kind of says like, this is a Korean drama. And I'm like, maybe you can't really call everything that comes out of Korea a Korean drama, because that has so much embedded connotation to what it is. A Korean drama, in my eyes, is more of a soap opera, more of the mainstream storytelling that we see from Korea, which is great. But then there's that whole other side to Director Lee, who for his entire career has been holding a mirror up to society, has been holding a mirror up to himself and to the world, and has been brave enough to go to places that a lot of people are afraid to go to. And he's lived through a time where he's been suppressed, and now he's living through a time where he's hopefully being celebrated. And that's the thing that I didn't take like an active awareness into, but now that I see what we've made and what he's created, and now that I see the world as it is, I really understand that there's an opportunity here for Director Lee, for people to know him, because he's not the flashiest person outwardly trying to take in all that stuff. But man, that guy's like one of the world's gems, and a lot of people don't know.
What was the best part of working with him on this film? What makes him so special as a director?
If you can be 65 and make a film for the youth without any ego and a complete awareness of yourself and the things that you might have not even known, and give that up and admit that you might have been wrong in the past, and just reform yourself or update yourself or kill your ego, which is the goal of us every day, to die every day, and he can do that. That's not many times you see a 65-year-old man be able to do that. Not because they're unable to, but because it's hard in general.
Well, we're sort of coded to do the same thing and to sort of repeat our actions. So if he's able to kind of like see things with new eyes, that's got to be exciting as an actor, right?
Oh my God, like that gives you the most trust, the utmost confidence. When he asks you to be in his film, you know that it's not him being like, perform for me. I'm asking you because your skill. That might be a part of it, but he's really asking you because he's like, you're the character for this film that I want for this film. And I'd like you to be the actor in it. And so when he gives you that kind of trust, you go, okay, I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to get better at Korean here. I'm supposed to, there was no part of me that when I said yes, that really overcame myself with, I wasn't scared. But in hindsight, I'm like, that's terrifying what I tried to accomplish. And the fact that I got through it somehow is a miracle at best. And, it's scary. I kind of freak out when I think about like what I said yes to. And then on the other end of it, coming out of it, you realize that this was just something that happened and you got to be a part of it. And it's pretty awesome. But Director Lee is that. He's the wise turtle sage that everyone's looking for.
You work with some amazing directors already. I'm wondering what that trust and direction looks like on set. You deliver some extremely powerful monologues in this film. Obviously, Director Lee is getting so much out of you in this collaboration. What kind of direction is he giving you?
We talked a lot about the philosophy of this character. We talked a lot about the root of where his mental state comes from. And that came through my own personal understandings, my own personal life changes. And then on top of that, you read through the gamut of what maybe like a Gatsby-esque character reads through, they're at self-actualization mode, right? So we read through all that, but the way that he directed was more on when do we show Ben in a specific light in each situation. So here we'd like to show him this way, or here we'd like to show him that way. And that's really all we'd really talk about. Besides that, he was like, I leave this to you. I don't want to spoil anything, but even down to the end, he was like, you're the only one person that will know. Have you guys seen it? Have you?
Yeah.
So I'm the only one that knows.
Right.
You're the only one that knows, and you're not going to tell any of us.
No
I'm
way.
guessing.
No way.
Oh my God.
But that was part of the confidence. Was Director Lee was, you hear a lot of great directors always say like, casting is the most important part, and he has that genius in him where, he just goes, "You're the character, you do it, you make the choices, and I'll film it." And I don't know if that works in every scenario, but I will say, of the directors that I've been fortunate enough to work with, Director Bong, Lee, Boots, they give you that freedom.
Right. Can we talk about Boots for a second? Because we had him on the show a couple months back to talk about Sorry to Bother You, which is fantastic, and you're great in it as Squeeze. Like, how does that work on a film set like that? Because I think the cultural context has to be very different, right? As an actor. Yeah. So like when you're working on, like when you're performing that character, like how does your approach differ?
I think it starts with reading, for me at least. I kind of just dive into a lot of text and try to shift my mental state to, where these texts will lead me. But you can make those active choices as an actor.
What kind of stuff are you reading?
Well, I was reading a lot of Saul Alinsky. I was reading the Communist Manifesto.
That makes sense.
You kind of go through that. I even had a really great connect with a guy that salts, and a union organizer that does it, but like super underground. And Boots put me in touch with that person, and it was great to get that kind of perspective. And also, Boots was a union organizer, so he was a great resource to fall back on. But I would say, overall, with Boots, it's that same vibe where you meet someone that is so sure of their story and so sure of their perspective that you realize that this is not a collaboration in the sense that like there's all individuals that are coming together and bringing their own piece, and then we're going to figure out how this gets together. You're really there because he's sourced talent and people to unify to make his vision. And when you can get that kind of camaraderie going on set, I've just been, even Walking Dead for me was that feel where people were just behind the mission. And when you are, that ego kind of dissipates, and then all of a sudden you're just part of like a magical thing that people are filming. Yeah.
We're obviously living in a time in the industry where the industry itself is being called out to be more diverse. Who do you think has the greatest responsibility to push the envelope and make active change? Is it audiences? Is it gatekeepers? What do you think?
That's a tough question. I would say, it seems like the answer is always going to be it's a collaborative effort. I think audiences, I think we just got to change what we put out, in my personal opinion. I think sometimes audiences don't know what you're not giving them. If you're picking between whatever you have, you're going to call whatever you have a 10 or a 1. But you can blame individuals, you can blame gatekeepers, you can blame whatever. I think we're just entering into a time where information has become so accessible that everyone has caught up to maybe the falsehoods of life. And because of that, I think a lot of people are hoping to right some wrongs. And with that in mind, I think we're taking the necessary steps to go there. And so each step that we take forward, whether it be, people of color being in film, or films focus around people of color, or films that have nothing to do with that but are a diverse cast, those are all beneficial, and I think really good for people to know that where we're headed especially is a very more cosmopolitan way of living. So I was just saying to a friend, I mean, there's no difference between Toronto and New York. You know, I mean, there is. I don't want to be insulting to anyone, but you know, you go there and you can get the same things. The people are, the archetypes are there.
Yeah.
But if we can get down to a place where you recognize that people are all kind of their own person and individual and have their own thing going on, maybe we can spread the stories wider so they're not so monolithic or easy to digest or obvious. I think people are ready to get more information in that regard. Hopefully more. I personally feel like the next stage, this is what I hope, is that we'll communicate less with our brains and more with our kind of our emotions.
How do you do that? And I feel like you probably have like somewhat of an answer to that because you did that with director Lee, right? Like how is that? How do you even approach doing that with people in like a really honest sort of way?
Man, I don't have an answer to that. I don't know.
Okay.
I will say that, you know, when you have so much information and when everybody has the same information, the level of intelligence per how much knowledge you have, which is just information, is kind of flat and equal. So at that point, all you can really have is wisdom, which is when to know things are gray, when to know that life is not black and white, when to know when this doesn't necessarily equate to this, or you can't mathematically algorithmic deduce if someone's wrong or not.
Right.
And I don't know how to tap into that emotion on like a instructional level. I don't know how to say that to somebody, but there is something about the fakeness of people thinking that knowledge is wisdom, and that's not true. I think people look to their phones and go, I know this, I found it. And it's like, well, anyone can do that. So what's your wisdom? How do you speak from that place? And I think that's just kind of tapping into maybe what your gut feels, what your heart feels, because a lot of the time we react, and then we have to like put things together to be like, was this the right move and all that stuff? And usually you get to a good middle ground if you do the work. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, you're asking the wrong person. I'm just trying to, I don't know, I'm just trying to go with it. But Director Lee was one of those people that when I met them, I was just like, you are a genius, but through wisdom, you're a genius. Yeah.
Well, I think what you were talking about earlier in terms of diverse voices, and I think what that leads to is original stories that you haven't seen on screen before, and I think that should be a driving force in terms of why having more diverse voices behind in front of the camera matters because of this lack of originality. And I wonder, for you, do you feel this added pressure of in the Korean American community that it's kind of like, okay, you're a huge pillar to this and a huge piece to this. Show us what you can do.
Oof. You know, I'll be honest. Sometimes I don't think about that stuff as much. You know, it's weird because I feel like it's always been this case, but I feel like the internet has made it that much more intense. But there's the professional world and then your real life. And the professional life and your real life has always had a disparity. Maybe before you could hide it a little better, the delineation. But these days, the professional life seems like your real life. And that could not be further from the truth for me. I woke up with puke on my shirt the other, you know what I mean? Like that's my kid. I have a kid and I'm at home and
how old's your kid?
He's a year and a half. And
this explains things. I thought I was going somewhere else. I was
this is sad. Meaning like, you know, like you wake up with bags in your eyes. You wake up and you have bad breath like everyone else, and it's just your life. And then you hear things like, you know, there's a position that you might hold in some community or in the larger scheme of things. And maybe I should be more conscious about thinking about that. And it doesn't go, I don't not acknowledge it. I guess it's to say that my MO at the moment is to find myself as much as I can and to express myself as much as I can. And I feel like the work of what it means to the community will ultimately be served through that agenda. I feel like sometimes when you do focus on a particular aspect of who you are, especially as an artist, and you focus on that, there's nothing wrong with that, especially if that's where your heart is and where you want to speak from. But sometimes it has a tendency to take away other portions of yourself. So as we focus on just the racial component of who I am, it reduces, sometimes you can self-reduce yourself to that portion of who you are. When I'm a 5'9" male who likes this and that, and I have a kid and all that stuff. And there's so many multiple facets of who I am. But I hope that this is a moment, functional moment for us, where we as a society can move past boxes, and that this is part of the process. But then there's also, I feel like, an acknowledgement that needs to be made that, when you do focus on one thing always, you could lose yourself to that. You should always celebrate it, but it should empower you to be yourself. And so I think we're headed there. I see so many, we had just like a wonderful month of Asian representation, and you see Crazy Rich Asians, you see Searching, you see To All the Boys, and you see all these amazing Asian American talents and Asian talents that are finally getting a job so that they can show that they exist. And those are all the right steps in the right direction. And I hope all those actors that are getting their shots get more shots, and they're not put into the box where every single interaction that they have to make has to acknowledge their ethnicity, but rather they can acknowledge their humanness, So I'm cognizant of the moment.
It does feel like a turning point almost, right?
Yes.
Because we're able to, we're seeing content that reflects the world as it actually is.
Yes.
Right? And that was not a thing that happened for a very long time, or it seems like it.
Well, and that's kind of where, when you look at Burning, it is unfortunate that, to be quite honest, I don't think I would have ever been able to find a role like this in the United States for myself. Not at the moment. I don't think I would have ever been asked, nor maybe even considered for that. That's my personal opinion, who knows? But I did go and I did make this film in another language that I don't primarily speak. And it was one of the most freeing experiences of my life, because I got to play in a place where the parameters were not about the way I look. It was just about the character that I am. And in knowing that, I do see a turning point. I see that this film prior, maybe 10 years ago, would have been like either just completely ignored or, 10 years ago, Korean cinema was being kind of explored and given praise for its genre.
Right.
They were more like, "Ooh, I like what this genre does." But that also took out the portion that, like, Korean people are humans that can make any type of film. And all those films can speak to you regardless of the borders of our countries or our cultures or any ideologies that we place before ourselves to separate each other. And so when you make something like Burning and you hear the French audience be like, that spoke to me in ways that I'd never, ever considered, or an American audience say the same thing, you get goosebumps because you're like, that's it. That's what we're going for. That's what this whole natural process that I was somehow a part of came to be. And who knows if people will watch it. I personally hope that if you don't go to the theater, which I think
Gotta go to
people
the theater.
should,
Yeah.
that at least they have a giant TV at home and they either purchase it or honestly, like, pirate it, whatever. Like,
Find a way.
I'm not condoning it, but
See
this
the film.
is some amazing stuff from a master director, and yeah.
We love the film and really appreciate you taking the time to chat
Thank
with us,
you.
man. This was
Yeah.
a sincere pleasure. So
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
So great to meet you guys. Yeah. Thank you.